You're listening to NT Paranormal After Dark. Nothing normal about it.
Hey guys, how's it going? I'm trying to do this at a new time slot. Got home a little bit early from work, and I know a lot of the people that were interested in this particular podcast are over in the UK, and so by my calculations, it's getting close to 9 o'clock there. If it's not 9 o'clock already, right? So I'm broadcasting a little bit early, so some of our usual suspects might not show up in the chat, but that's okay. So anyway, hope y'all liked the new intro. Kind of gives everybody a chance to get in, and get on so they can watch the live stream, all that good stuff. And I got some new tricks up my sleeve too. So anyway, today's topic, I was going to talk about stone tape theory, but I decided to take a vote on whether or not I should do Bigfoot / Lake Worth monster and stone tape theory. And you guys unanimously wanted to hear me ramble on about Bigfoot. So, hey Carl, how's it going? Hey Deborah. Big disclaimer before this podcast. I am not a cryptozoologist. I am not a Bigfoot expert. I don't really, other than the research that I did over the past few weeks, I don't actually know or didn't previously know a whole lot about Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but it's part of the paranormal umbrella. So I'm fine talking about it. I don't usually go Sasquatch hunting, but one of the stories, one of my favorite stories about Sasquatch, is actually like a local thing that's actually only like 10 minutes from the house. So we've been kind of talking about doing like a live stream investigation episode where we actually go looking for Sasquatch. So it'll be this podcast and that investigation will be a big departure from what we normally do. But I'm excited to do it, especially after doing some of the research. I gotta say, from the onset, there's a huge amount of skepticism there. I mean, there's looking at it, there's really no scientific, just like the paranormal or whatever. But I still do those types of investigations. But having said that, there actually is a lot of interesting info out there. So since I know a lot of you guys are across the ocean from me, and this is Bigfoot is kind of from my research I found out it's primarily a United States phenomenon or sighting or whatever. So I'll just kind of get everybody in on what Bigfoot is, what Sasquatch is. So yay, look what I can do. Okay, so Bigfoot, it's a creature that's mainly spotted in northwest United States, but it has been sighted in places all over the world. The accounts and the sightings of Bigfoot is that it's between 6 foot, 8 feet tall. That'd be 1.8 to 2.7 meters. And footprints are the main evidence that people point to. These footprints have been found out in dirt, out in mud, out in the wilderness. People have done plaster casts, and they're typically 24 inches by 8 inches long. So that's like 60 by 20 centimeters. But the big dispute on the footprints that are found is some of them come with claw marks in them, right? And typically most people think of Sasquatch as like a primate. So a lot of anthropologists and zoologists, stuff like that, would say that it's actually a misidentified bear footprint because bears have 5 toes and claws. So that's kind of one of the things that's disputed. Bigfoot has a bunch of different names it goes by. You might know it by a different name. Yeti, Sasquatch, Bigfoot. In the South United States, they'll call it a skunk ape. In Europe, it was originally known as just like a wild man. Hey Matt, how's it going? Good to see you here. Um, but Bigfoot is the name that's like most known worldwide. Now, so other than just the plaster cast, the name Bigfoot that it got its nickname from is actually a it's an Americus thing, right? So where that actually comes from is the name Bigfoot is first. They think it first came from a Wendat chief that actually had that nickname in the 1830s. So according to historical accounts, this is a human too. This is a Native American from the Wendat tribe. This guy was about 7 feet tall. He was the biggest of all his brothers in his tribe, and apparently this guy just had huge feet. And so he was, by his own tribe and by the people that were settling over here, that he was called Chief Bigfoot. There was one other account in the 19th century, specifically spotted elk was also called Bigfoot. He was a well-known Lakota leader that was killed at the Wounded Knee Massacre in 1890. So these two tribe leaders were both known as Bigfoot before there were any real sightings of a Sasquatch type creature or anything like that. And those two tribe leaders, that's probably where the namesake comes from for the bear that was hit over here. So sorry, I'm still getting used to this over here. Yeah, okay. So anyway, here's an article I pulled up, and so the earliest printing of Bigfoot in the news actually isn't even associated with Sasquatch. It's associated with a grizzly bear attack. The first grizzly bear Bigfoot was reported killed near Fresno, California, in 1895 after killing sheep for 15 years. His weight was estimated at 2,000 pounds. Like that's 900 kilograms, right? And then there was actually a second one in Idaho in the 1890s. And that one happened between the Snake and the Salmon Rivers. And everything they talked about in that article, it was like almost supernatural. Like, but for even a grizzly bear, that's like 3 times the size of a normal grizzly bear. And it was active for 15 years. It was just slaughtering sheep. People were disappearing. And from the article I read, the story I read, is like it was so they finally found this thing in a cave after tracking it down, and they oh, I'm sorry. I just got here and missed if you said you believed in Sasquatch or not. I don't know. I'm on the fence. I don't. I think it's a possibility. But you know, I haven't had a sighting or anything, so I'm just kind of going through the history of it and all that. But so they tracked this bear to a cave in Fresno, California, and they finally killed it. But the bear was so big that they couldn't even remove it from the cave. So they ended up you know, harvesting it for meat, skinning it, and they had to bring this stuff out in a convoy. And when they opened this thing up, it had 30 or 40 bullets in it from all the times that people had spotted this thing and shot it and not killed it, right? So it was this big, massive effort. It was national news, and that's actually the first instances that Bigfoot actually shows up like in media or anything. And it wasn't even tied to like Sasquatch or Yeti. They were actually just talking about this big, massive bear, and that kind of goes back to why a lot of people might think that a lot of Sasquatch sightings are actually just the word escapes me, misinterpreted bear sightings or something, misidentification. That's the word I was trying to find, right? So eventually this this bear story that just like that was national news at the time. You gotta remember we were just like developing the railroad, things like that. This national news as Darwinism kind of like really set in and became more widespread known, the theory of evolution, things like that. It kind of got mixed in and translated to the European wild man myth, which was like of a basically like a 7 foot tall caveman that just lived out in the woods, was completely feral, not part of society, and they kind of got like formulated and mixed together or whatever. So that's kind of where that all starts out. But even though it was that European wild man and just that grizzly bear in Fresno and that one in Idaho, suddenly you see this trend where sightings start popping up all over the world. Everybody's heard about the abominable snowman in the Himalayas. And everyone I've ever talked to in the U.S. has some kind of local Bigfoot legend. So it's mainly a U.S. sighting sort of thing. Hey, Allie, how you doing? We're talking about Bigfoot. So anyway, I found this map. So the darker areas mean there are more sightings. The lighter areas means there's less sightings, right? So if you notice, most everything is the two main places are like right there on the West Coast. The almost 70% of the sightings are up in that Spokane, Washington area. And actually that would be a good place for like a wild man or a Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, to hang out, because there's just lots of vegetation. It's really dense forest. And there would be plenty you could live in total isolation out there and maybe live your whole life and nobody actually find you. So it makes sense that area would be where 70% of these sightings come from, whether or not they're misidentified or not. If it's people just seeing a grizzly bear or just some kind of large animal, or actually seeing Sasquatch, that would be the place that it would be most likely for that to happen. So I found it very interesting that all the reports that are actually documented actually kind of fall in line with the correct geography. Because if you notice, like on this map, all the sort of Midwest areas, it's a lot more sparse, and that's because it's just like this. It's just open, flat land. Like that's most of what this country is. It's just open, flat plains, and then you get to the edges, and that's where you find like your mountains and your thick vegetation and things like that. Let's see. Let me look at my notes here. Tracking claims of Bigfoot sightings across the globe. A third of the sightings are reported in the Pacific Northwest region. 75% are in Spokane, Washington. So what do experts say Sasquatch is? That's other than just your average run-of-the-mill people. So people that are Sasquatch experts believe that the explanation for most sightings is actually misidentification, which is what I've been talking about, mostly bears. But the interesting thing is there have been plenty of pictures and videos and images of Bigfoot. Like it's not like, for there being no scientific evidence, you would think it would be really hard to find like Bigfoot videos or whatever. But as I kind of dug into it, of course, everybody knows about the Patterson, the famous Patterson video, which I think I have a screenshot in the roll for that. But it's not real hard to find, and it's just like kind of the ghost hunting aspect is, real or not, there's plenty of videos out there. Hey Kat, how's it going? Hey Matt, good to see you. So the most, aside from the Patterson video, the most prominent one that I brought up, this one's from 2007, Bigfoot Field Researchers Organizations, BFRO, by the way. That's a horrible acronym, but, you know, they do what they do. Put forward some photos, which they claim showed a juvenile Bigfoot. So they caught this on a game camera, and this is supposed to be the big smoking gun. This is supposed to be the best documented picture that's been grabbed of Bigfoot that hasn't been proven a total hoax. And it doesn't look like a hoax to me. I could go with misidentification of that, which is the story goes on to say the Pennsylvania Game Commissioner, however, said that the photos were of a bear with mange. So I'm kind of looking at this photo, and I can kind of see that because of the way the hair on it looks. But anthropologist Jeffrey Meldrum, which is actually, he's a really respected anthropologist. I can't go, I've got too much subject matter to cover, but you should actually look up a lot of his studies because for a legit anthropologist, he actually spends a lot of time like discussing Bigfoot and Yetis and things like that, and not in that sort of condescending way that science usually looks at these kind of like fringe topics. He actually takes the time to explain, you know, pros and cons of the theory or whatever. But his actual, and this kind of lends a little bit of credibility to the idea that it's a primate, but he said that the limb proportions of the creature were not bear-like; they were more like a chimpanzee. So that kind of substantiates the theory a little bit that there is some sort of primate that is out there. So this one's from 2007. I believe the next, and so this is the one. This is the super famous one, the Patterson footage, which this was a video. And depending on who you talk to, has either been debunked or not debunked. The big thing that is always the huge question on this particular video is the muscle structure. Of course, like if you've seen the full motion video, the way it's walking's kind of weird. But you know, big proponents that it's actual footage will say, well, no human could actually do that kind of body acting, and there's no suit that would look that good. And then if you talk to different people, like in the movie effects industry, they'll say either you can or you can't do it. But the story of Patterson's really interesting because the thing is he set out to make a Bigfoot video, and he was out there for a long time actually failing, and he gave up at one point, and then he went back to do it, and then all of a sudden caught Bigfoot. So aside from the actually watching the footage, like I really I would lean, because I know the story of how he did his documentary, like what he was doing, what was going on at the time, because this dude was in huge financial straits at the time. I feel that this footage is fake, but not because of anything observable in the video. Like, I'm real good with media production and things like that, but when it comes to makeup and effects and things like that, I have a limited knowledge. I mean, I'm smart, I can look at this and I have an opinion on it, but I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to throw my hat in the ring on that. Hey, Jen, how's it going? Let's see, Delon said, I think that people are just more vocal in certain places, and that those reports could possibly be way off. Yes, and I agree. Depending on kind of like your region, different things are more widely accepted, so people are more willing to like talk about it. But I also, and to your point, people could just be way off. I mean, even the people that go out and believe like wholeheartedly that Bigfoot is a thing, they think the stats I read, they say 90% of the reports are just misidentification. So even the people hunting Bigfoot think that like 90% of the sightings were just people that saw something and didn't quite comprehend what they were seeing, or maybe they're, you know, like it was obscured through the woods, or they were just startled, you know, or their imagination got to them, or they're not familiar with animal species. Like, I'm not an anthropologist, so, I might see a black bear and think it's a grizzly bear, so somebody might see a grizzly bear and say, holy crap, that's a Bigfoot. Hey, April, how's it going? Catherine, smells like desperation. Yes, and I think that's something that actually plagues all of the paranormal field, too, is a lot of people get out there and they really want to find something, and they do believe it. They want to get in there and find something so bad, but they get disappointed when it doesn't just happen, and eventually, after a long time of investing all your money into it, you overextend yourself, you get kind of desperate, and you go to lengths that you probably shouldn't go to try to produce evidence, fake evidence or whatever. Another story I read was a guy that, and this is actually pretty recently, said he actually shot and killed Bigfoot, but he kept the body hidden away because he didn't want it to get stolen, and he did all these lab tests and everything and swore up and down that he confirmed he got Bigfoot, right? And then the next year he actually, like, took the body on like a carny tour, to show everybody, hey, look, I shot Bigfoot, which is pretty horrible, by the way. I think I think anybody that's hunting Bigfoot, if you're hunting it to kill it, that's pretty horrible. But anyway, he does this big tour, makes about $40,000, and then finally, this Bigfoot that's on ice or whatever, they thaw it out, and it turns out it's made of rubber and camel hair or whatever, and he comes out and says, yeah, that Bigfoot's a hoax, but I actually have the real one on ice back at home. I just don't want it to get stolen, right? So whether you believe his account of that story or not, like, if you do believe that, then it sounds like he's going to a length that he shouldn't have to prove something he really believes in. If he's really got a body or whatever, he should really donate it to like a legitimate science outlet, not make $40,000 on a fake, because that totally kills his credibility. And of course, if he doesn't have that, then he's definitely going to way too far lengths to try to prove Bigfoot is a thing, and he's just trying to make money off of it. So other theories, mostly I've talked about people think it's a big black bear. But where does this, like, other than this Patterson footage here and the one in 2007 that I brought up, where does the whole primate thing come from, right? So there's like 4 or 5 main theories about what Bigfoot could actually be. Giant Opithecus. Anthropologist Grover Krantz and Jeffrey H. Bourne believe that Bigfoot could be a relic population of Giant Opithecus. Giant Opithecus. Say it 3 times and I got it right. Giant Opithecus, right? This extinct species whose fossils have only been found in Asia, but they believe it could have come to the Americas via the Bering Land Bridge. Now, this is interesting because we have shown history that humans, Neanderthals, different species of animals have actually migrated from other side of the planet over here to North American, even South America regions via the Bering Land Bridge. But the big problem with this theory is that the only recovered fossils of Gigantopithecus have actually been so this would be this would be why it's the big theory, right? So somebody went back and they looked, okay, what is ape-like and would be big enough to be considered Bigfoot, and that's Giant Opithecus or Gigantopithecus blackie, right? And then of course the middle one would be human, and this would be gigantic, which would be another. Everything's backwards, sorry. So this one here would be like the modern day version of it, what it's evolved to. So I'm getting this down. I should be a weatherman. So this is the one that they actually think it is, and that's what would most likely be Bigfoot if like somehow that breed of the species like survived and was isolated somewhere. But the huge problem with that is the only fossil that's actually been found of that particular species is the mandible, the bottom part of the jaw, right? It's only been found in Asia, so you can theorize all day long that it came to North America via that Bering Land Bridge, but we found no evidence that that species did. Plus, the big part of that jaw that would really indicate whether or not it was that big is actually missing. That's actually speculation that that particular species was actually that big. Hey Chris, how's it going? Hi Julie. Jen says there's a horrible TV show with men running around with guns looking to kill a Bigfoot. That show sounds horrible, right? Um, I think it's fine to go looking for Bigfoot or looking for animals to like document species and discovery and things like that. But I am not a huge proponent of sport hunting. Hunting for necessity is okay. Hunting to control population. Obviously, there's not an overpopulation of Bigfoot, or else we would know there's Bigfoot, and I would probably have two in my backyard right now. But I'm not a proponent of sport hunting in the least bit, and that might make me a little bit humanitarian, whatever you want to call it. Maybe I'm a little too liberal on that, but I'm not a fan of sport hunting, and especially not a fan of sport hunting something that would be an endangered species or a brand new species that we might discover or whatever. And I think any anthropologist or cryptozoologist or zoologist would actually agree with me on that point. Anyway, as I was saying, the only recovered fossils of this particular species is the mandible, and the main part that would actually indicate that it was ever that big is actually missing, right? So they're not 100% sure that it was that tall. They do know it was a large creature, though. The other thing is, if it was that massive, most experts actually agree that it would probably not be bipedal. It wouldn't. Not that it wouldn't be able to support its weight. Like we have giant bears. Of course, there's like dinosaurs that were bipedal. It can support its weight, but because of the way primates are designed, it wouldn't be practical for it. So the idea is that if it's as big as they're saying, it would probably be a quadruped. For the most part, it might go up on its hind legs sometimes, like a bear. It'll walk around on its back feet, but it's not a biped, it's a quadruped. It usually uses its front legs to move around, especially at speed, like when it's running, right? So primates probably got smaller to adapt so that they could actually be more bipedal. But even modern day primates, they still walk around as a quadruped. So there's a little bit of dispute about, or actually there's a lot of dispute about giant Opithecus being the main proponent of what could be Bigfoot. Let me check out. Let's see, Chris. Hunting and control population is dumb when natural selection is already doing that. I agree and I disagree. I don't want to get too off topic about hunting in this. Deer here in I'm not sure where you're from, but where I'm from here in Texas, deer do overpopulate, like really, really bad. And if we don't control the population here, they do get out of control. Now, that's not necessarily saying that nature wouldn't correct that at some point. I'm not a zoologist. I'm not an expert in that field. So I could totally be wrong. I'm not saying nobody couldn't change my mind with a good argument or anything like that. This is just what I've been taught and I know. But like I said, I don't like hunting for sport. I don't deer hunt. I do like venison. I do like deer meat. But I mean, just the way we treat our animals in general, globally, isn't really good. I'm just trying to kind of be fair about the topic because I don't want to completely knock hunters because I'm fine with eating meat, things like that. But I am all for like humane killing and things like that. But I don't necessarily have like the answer for that, right? So I don't meet it's not part of my expertise, so I don't know the correct answer there, and I don't want to get a whole bunch of people offended, because my opinions could either go one way or the other. I'd be happy to discuss it like on another podcast or something like that. But I kind of want to stick to the paranormal thing. But I mean, you do bring up a good point. I think nature has a way of balancing itself out. And I think humans are more harmful to the planet and ecosystems than they are helpful to it. So you could possibly be right. At the moment, there are certain things I kind of disagree. I think humans could use a little bit of population control, honestly, just from some of the interactions I've had. But that's a totally different topic, and I'm totally kidding, by the way. So so I got a little off track there. So Gynopithecus was the first one that came up. The next one, primatologist. Oh, that's another one. Primatologists. These are people that they basically they're like anthropologists, but they only study primates, right? So primatologist John Napier and anthropologist Gordon Strassenberg have suggested a species of, oh, I'm going to say this totally wrong, Paranthropus. Third time's a charm, right? Paranthropus as a possibility. Paranthropus is robust with a gorilla-type skull and a bipedal gait. Those are the main things, because they're looking for a primate that's bipedal. Because all the tracks they find, they don't find knuckle marks in there. They just find these huge five-toed feet, right? Hey, Charlene, how's it going? Awesome. I haven't actually seen you show up live before, so we're talking about Bigfoot. Anyway, so they always just find these huge five-toed feet, but no knuckle marks. So bipedal is the main thing. So these guys think that Paranthropus is a good candidate because it's big, it's gorilla and structural. It keeps a bipedal gait most of the time. The problem with that, right? There's always a problem with it. That all those fossils are found in Africa. None are found here. And that's even further from Asia, because if you're talking about how the heck did it get over to North America, it would have to go all the way up through the Middle East, through Asia, to that Bering Land Bridge, all the way down through Canada, and finally settle in our Northeast Territory and slowly spread all the way down through North America, down to South America. So it's a possibility, but there's absolutely no fossil evidence there's no fossil evidence to indicate that could even be a thing. And of course, we're talking about species that are known to be extinct. So when they bring up these theories, they're talking about like isolated pockets of an extinct species that are still living. These are like the same theories that Megalodon is still in the ocean somewhere. Like it could be a thing, but nobody's seen it. There's no real proof, right? So of course you kind of go down I went ahead too far. So you kind of go down the line and you run into the same problems with Neanderthal, Homo erectus, all these like previous evolutions of the primate species, all the way up through to us, all the way through the Darwin chart. Nothing quite lines up size-wise, bipedal-wise, and also regionally. So that's where they run into some problems. So what the hell could this be? So once you run through all those main theories, the big thing that comes up is hoaxes, which I kind of talked before. The next most likely and probably common explanation is hoax. So not just misidentification, but people outright faking it. So what kind of spurred this whole idea for a Bigfoot podcast anyway was I wanted to talk about a local Bigfoot story. And a lot of people know it as like the goat man's actually it's another misnomer for not necessarily for Bigfoot, but for like creatures that live out in the wilderness and then they're not quite identified and they kind of get lumped in with like Sasquatch and stuff like that. Of course, as I get into this story, like you'll kind of understand why it gets lumped in there because of like the photographic evidence and things like that, right? So, but that's what got me started on it. But as I was kind of like gauging the audience a little bit, it seemed like there was like an overwhelming interest for, hey, we want to hear about Bigfoot, Sasquatch in general. Because before this research, I didn't actually like I had only heard about Bigfoot sightings in the U.S. and the abominable snowman in the Himalayas. I'd never heard about any of the things in between. I always just kind of assumed that they were there. And then as I did the research, I realized it was mainly like a North America thing. And I think a lot of that ties back to Bigfoot being mainly like a Native American legend. Like when they came over and they were talking, like they didn't call it Bigfoot or Sasquatch. They had different names for it. But the Native Americans would talk about these giant creatures that sometimes they said that they were like spirit protectors, things like that, that were like watching over their tribes but lived out there. And I think a lot of that kind of perpetuates the myth. But literally just 10 minutes away from where I live now, maybe 5 minutes away from where I grew up, is Lake Worth. And in Lake Worth is Greer Island, right? Which is like there's a little land bridge that goes to, you can get to it through the Fort Worth Nature Center. Like I've been there, I've walked around, right? But one of my favorite stories about Sasquatch actually just basically happened in my backyard. And hey Vicky, how's it going? There were so many sightings and police reports and stuff that like it just couldn't be ignored. There was some legitimacy to the events that happened in peyote, right? I would that would be great. Uh, yeah, peyote is a pretty good explanation, but I don't think a lot of people are doing peyote now. So maybe there's a little more to it than just people using psychotropic drugs, which are excellent, by the way. So, uh, you got me off track on the peyote comment. So, anyway, but I was talking about the Lake Worth monster. There were so many accounts and sightings and things that happened. So this all happened in 1969, right? Reports of sightings by local citizens describing a half man, half goat with fur and scales. So first off, right off the bat, like the beginning of like after I looked up like the official story and everything, right? So the initial sightings of this thing said it was half man, half goat. That's more like the satire sort of thing. But they said it had fur and scales. Biologically, that's impossible. Now, maybe it looked like scales because it had like a sort of mange or whatever. A lot of times the hair can get matted. It could just be misidentification. A lot of times when there's eyewitness reports and things like that, people don't recall the details, right? So, but already we have some like inconsistencies going on, like my ability to speak during public shows. A half man, half goat with fur and scales. This led to the belief that a mysterious creature lived in Lake Worth, Texas. Newspapers reported the alleged sightings, including one man who claimed the creature landed on his car after jumping out of a tree, and then there were others that claimed the creature actually threw an automobile tire at the car tire at them, right? Newspapers published a photograph alleging to be the monster. There are numerous police reports where they went out and investigated a bunch of times. But during all that, nobody ever found any real physical evidence of the creature, right? So, kind of going step by step, what was going on in 1969? Well, we were in the Vietnam conflict at the time. So, also at the time this happened, it was in the middle of summer, right? So one of the big thoughts. Actually, let me get to that towards the end of the story. Let me do that as the conclusion, right? Okay, so it's 1969. We're in the middle of the Vietnam conflict. So a lot of our population's been like drafted and sent overseas or whatever. So you have like a lot of parents here and a lot of younger people and like your middle ages here, right? So a lot of our 18 to 25 population is actually missing from the area. It's the middle of summer. If you're from Texas, you know it's balls hot at the time. People are miserable. Of course, it's 1969. We don't have the advent of the internet or we have TV, radio, but ultimately people are trying to like entertain themselves. So this story actually went national and like really caught the attention of a lot of people. Like a lot of people were interested in this, and the story actually caught the attention of a lot of Bigfoot hunters at the time, and they actually had like at one time over the course of time about 1,000 different investigators came out to try to hunt this thing down and get to the facts. So the official story was reported on by Jim Mars, and he's the one that actually did the national news story. And I've got some. I'm not going to read the whole thing out, but I got some key quotes from it. So terrified. Shut up. Okay, 6 terrified residents told police early today that they were attacked by a thing they described as being half man, half goat, and covered with fur and scales. 4 units of Fort Worth police and the residents searched in vain for the thing, which was reported seen at Lake Worth near Greer Island. So, by the way, this here is the report that I'm basically reading. Of course, it's kind of cut off, and this is a book that was actually self-published and written about it. But this is Greer Island here. So, as you can see, Lake Worth kind of wraps around this sort of peninsula area here, and Greer Island is kind of just stuck in the middle of it. And if you look real close, there's like a right directly. Of course, I can't put my finger over it, right? So directly up between the peninsula and Greer Island, there's this big, long land bridge where you can just walk back and forth. You don't need a boat to get there. And they thought this thing lived on Greer Island. So a lot of times it's not called the Lake Worth monster. It's called the Greer Island monster or Greer Island Bigfoot or Goat Man, right? But that's where a lot of the sightings were taking place, either on the edge of Greer Island or in this little peninsula area. And then if you go over here, you can see the bridge between Lake Worth and kind of where it goes into Fort Worth or whatever. A lot of sightings were actually seen over there, but most everything's kind of over in this area, but kind of north on the peninsula, south of Greer Island. So John Reichert told police that the creature leapt from a tree, landed on his car, and the physical evidence, and like a lot of people didn't believe him, but this guy actually had an 18-inch scar down the side of his Chevy, right? And it looked like car marks, and they couldn't, in like, probably if I was in that time and I was the police, I'd probably be like, you hit a rail and you're just, But he was actually one of the first reports. Like, there was no reason to feed into that frenzy yet at the time he did this. So that's kind of that's kind of one point in his favor that something actually happened. Chelsea says he lives at Camp Carter. Oh, okay, cool. But so that's kind of one point in his favor because it wasn't widely known about these Greer Island monster reports yet, so there was no reason to kind of feed into that yet. And also, they in the police reports, like they looked to check to make sure he didn't just like wreck his car as like a drunk driver, and he did not make any kind of auto insurance claim on the car because he actually didn't have insurance. So so when you look into reasons to make up a hoax, I mean, you don't have to really have a reason to make up a hoax, but if you're looking for reasons that this guy would just come up with this like weird story, other than attention, there's no real motive there. So that actually kind of makes it a pretty good account of, hey, there's this thing going on, right? So anyway, after that, I lost my place on my notes. So yeah, there was this 18-inch scar down the side of the Chevy. And what the police said about it, we did make a serious investigation because those people were really scared. They were talking about the people that actually had the other experience. The police also revealed that they had received previous reports in the past, but they had laughed them off. So there had been previous reports of people seeing a creature out there, but it wasn't actually widely known. Now, towns talk, so they might have communicated with each other. So to say that John Reichart, there was no way he had previous knowledge of stories of a Bigfoot out there would be off base, because it is totally possible. It's just not really likely. There's just not a lot of evidence to support that the previous sightings were ever taken seriously or spread around. But it could have happened in like local circles or whatever. So they do an investigation of that. They don't find anything. They're a little worried about it because there's like some physical evidence, I guess. And then the next night, the monster, in front of a couple of dozen witnesses, said to have uttered a, and this is in quotes, pitiful cry. So it made some kind of, like, probably one of those weird redneck sort of Bigfoot noises that you see on the Bigfoot hunting shows. You know, I'm not going to do it. Probably sounds like the dying giraffe from South Park, right? So go look up that YouTube video after you watch this video. And it hurled a tire from the bluff at them. And this is actually near the, over in this area, right? There were a bunch of people basically hanging out over there. And this creature just comes out and just makes some weird sound, hurls a tire at them. A bunch of people see it, and they get a ton of reports that night, and the police have to come out and investigate it, and they actually find the tire and everything. And actually, if I go back to this image here, he's holding the tire, and they've actually done a diagram of where I don't know if you can see it real well, but they've got a diagram of where the tire was thrown, where it landed, and all that, right? So, and of course, that all happens, you know, off this bluff. You have a lot of witnesses that are in a panic at this moment, and it's not just like one guy in the woods saying they saw something. This is a lot of people in a very short period of time. Maybe not even and this is before this article is even printed. Like, until the tire thing happened, this article hadn't made the news yet. So anybody that would be collaborating on it would have been communicating through word of mouth, through tight-knit circles. We have places in the UK called Drakewell Tunnels, and our medium picked up on half a goat, half human while we were investigating. We caught horse running on EVP as our medium was saying that this thing was there. Holy cow, I actually want to talk to you later. That is crazy, because we had a similar experience with the sounds of like an animal running up on us, and after we analyzed it, it sounded like a horse sound, and that's actually connected with a skinwalker legend, which that's definitely a Native American thing. You might have heard the name, but you might not know what I'm talking about in reference to. But it's a sort of coyote human hybrid thing, can kind of transform back and forth, and it is associated with a goat man. So that is super coincidental, and I'm going to look you up and actually PM you later, because it's really interesting. But shit, that put me way off track, but that's cool. That's really neat. So this wasn't it wasn't even local news yet, much less national news. They didn't know about it. You have all these witnesses, and all of a sudden you have all these police reports, and you have the police combing the whole area looking for either somebody that's playing a prank or an actual creature that's out there. Now, they didn't find a creature out there. They didn't find any evidence of a creature. The other problem is if it's people out there doing a hoax, they didn't find any evidence of that either. So it's just this total mystery. But you have, hey Marianne, how's it going? You have all these people having this experience, and there's no evidence either way, and the police are involved. And so what this ends up doing is it brings out hundreds of amateur trackers and Bigfoot hunters and things like that. And the cops said this has brought out hundreds of amateur trackers descended on the area with all manner of Remingtons, Brownings, and Colts. He said, I'm not worried about the monsters so much as all those people wandering around out there with guns. And that was the police sergeant talking to the guy, to Mars, the guy that wrote the story, right? So there was this growing concern about, is there a Bigfoot out there that could potentially hurt people? And like, we were taking it seriously. And then there was this growing concern that, well, if there's kids out there pranking people, there's also all these hundreds of people out there trying to find this thing with guns. Like, a kid could get shot. Like, that's a chance you take when you take a hoax too far. Is like, you could be out there in a gorilla suit or a goat suit or whatever you're doing, and you, like, at least here in the US where gun control is the way it is, you can end up taking a bullet just for, and I remember being that age. I would have thought it was a funny prank too. I definitely would have put on a gorilla suit and messed with people driving by or coming up to the bluff. But here in Texas, man, that's a scary proposition, because here we have concealed carry, and actually we have open carry now. So there's no telling who's packing a Colt and is just gonna blast you, and then they're gonna pull off the monkey mask, and they're gonna be like, oh, it was Old Man Withers, just like the worst Scooby Doo episode ever. Like, that would be horrible. Could you imagine? They roll up in the mystery machine, and there's like, oh, there's a ghost, and Fred just blasts him with a shotgun, and Shaggy pulls off the mask. They're like, oh my God, you killed the shopkeeper. Like, I don't think the show would have lasted much longer, or at least Cartoon Network would have put it on Adult Swim at the very least. But that was a real possibility, and that's mainly what the police were concerned about. Like, okay, there could be something out there eating the people, or a kid could accidentally get shot, right? So, and this lasted like most of the summer. You're talking like a 2-month period of time, and there's just all these sightings. And so during this time, people saw the creature running through Johnson grass, found tracks too big for a man. Oh yeah, they actually found tracks of this creature, right? And they reported a dead sheep and blood. So they actually found animals that looked like they had been killed and eaten by an animal, right? So the story ended up going national. Reporters from all over the world actually ended up writing stories about it. And the authorities had a really strong opinion that if it was an animal, it was probably a bobcat. Of course, it didn't actually go with the physical descriptions, right? And then let's see, the big thing that showed up in the paper was somebody actually took a photograph of the creature, right? So let's see. I gotta skip ahead a little bit because I put my notes out of order. I just want to find the guy's name. Alan Plaster, right? So October 19. Oh, so this wasn't in summer. This was well after the summer incidents, right? So October 1969, 1:15 a.m. near Greer Island. He was over there. It doesn't say. I assume he was either camping or no. It does say he was actually driving by the area, or I think it says his wife was driving, and he had the camera out, and of course they already, by October, everybody had already heard the Greer Island stories or whatever, and he snapped this picture while going by, which I'll get into what he said about that, but this was the one of the super famous pictures. So I guess this wasn't part of the original article. Actually, yeah, this is part of the Lake Worth Monster book. Sorry, got my crap out of order. But this is the picture that was actually snapped of the creatures so far, right? So it doesn't look like a goat. Looks more like a primate. You know, big, good stature, that sort of thing. So anyway, going back to the order of my notes, right? Reporters from far and wide wrote stories about it, like, right, so it went national. Authorities continue to blame either a bobcat, which didn't match the physical descriptions. Of course, remember, they didn't have this picture yet at the time. They just kept getting half man, half goat, with scales and big hairy ape man description. So, you know, naturally they said bobcat. But, I mean, that makes sense, because that's what we have in the area that actually, you know, is kind of aggressive. And you know, for all intents and purposes, like if I find a sheep in my backyard or a deer in my backyard that's just totally ripped apart, first thing I'm going to think of is a bobcat. I've actually seen them on some of our outdoor investigations, along with coyotes. And then the other thing was the teenagers pulling pranks. Remember, ages 18 to 25, they're all in Vietnam at the time. So you're talking about kids that are still in school. So you're talking about middle school to seniors in high school, 14 to 17, right? So that was actually the big conclusion of that, is police thought that it was probably pranksters, because about the time school got back in early September, that's when the sightings just totally fell off the map. Like they would only get one or two later. And like I said, this picture was actually taken in October, so that was only really a month after school had let back in. Back then, school let back in September 1st. Nowadays, it happens in August. And I'm only familiar with that because my birthday is August 23rd, and it used to be I would start after my birthday, and then somewhere around like 5th, 6th grade or whatever, they pushed the school year further up into the summer, and I had to start school before my birthday, which always sucked. So that was a thing. And I mean, when you're looking at factual things, you have to look at trends and data, and that's what the police were doing. And the sightings just completely tanked. They dropped off. Not that there weren't any, but there were far fewer sightings after school let back in, which kind of indicates that the kids went back to school. They got too busy to pull pranks during the week, and you know, on the weekends they would rather go out and have a good time with their friends, drive around, whatever kids did in 1969 at that time. Sorry, I'm not that old. But, you know, they weren't running around in gorilla costumes, right? So, the lady who wrote the book, I'm going to say her last name's Clark. Why did I not put her first name? Clark is 80 years old now and still lives in Benbrook. But regrettably, actually, this information is about 5 or 6 years old now. So I didn't look up if this particular part is 100% accurate. Clark is 80 years old now, still lives in Benbrook, but regrettably she can't talk much about the summer. A series of strokes greatly damaged her memory and her health. Clark has always regretted the way she wrote her book, because after she published it, she saw the monster on 3 occasions. Okay, so the thing you got to know about this book she published, right? I'll go back to it. And it's actually really hard to find. If you find a copy of it, snatch it up, because they're very limited. It was self-published in 1969, so self-publishing now is a lot different than it used to be. Now you can distribute to millions of people on Amazon, but in 69, like, you had to find a local printer or whatever. I actually saw a copy of this book one time before I knew anything about the Lake Worth monster, and totally did not buy it. I wish I had picked it up because it's a cool piece of history. So if you happen to see this somewhere online or in like a used bookstore or something like that, like I did, you should snatch it up, even if you're not big on Bigfoot or whatever. But it's really cool, and it's a really cool piece of my local history, right? But the thing about this book is Clark didn't like, while it was interesting and she was reporting on it, she wasn't a real big believer in it. So the tone that she wrote it in, like she based it on all the eyewitness accounts and things like that, but largely wrote it as like a work of fiction, right? So she was writing about it from the perspective of this whole thing is a hoax. Like it's a biased book. It's a biased account of it. But but before she had her stroke and everything, she had mentioned several times after having published the book, and that's one of the reasons like she stopped distributing it, was because she felt bad about the way she wrote it, because she said after having wrote that book and written everything off, she had 3 sightings later of the actual creature. She said, if I'd seen it before I wrote the book would have been quite a lot different. It wouldn't have been semi-fiction. It would have been like a history. Most famous, perhaps, the only photograph ever taken, it was given to her by Alan Plaster, who snapped it in October 19... Okay, so that's... And that's where this photo comes from. This picture was given to her by Alan Plaster, the guy that took it when he was driving over by the bluff, right? Both her descriptions in the photo show a large white something, though it doesn't seem to favor a goat at all. Plaster, interviewed in 2006, said he doesn't... and so here's a real thing. So she was totally convinced after having wrote a book saying that it basically was a hoax. The guy that sent her this picture, over time, changed his mind about it, right? So what Plaster said about this photo in 2006 is, looking back, I realized that when I drove by, the creature stood up. Whatever it was, it wanted to be seen. That had to be a prank. That was somebody out there waiting for people to drive by. I don't think an animal would have acted that way. And that's a really interesting bit of logical thinking, right? So animals in the wild, if you've ever tried to approach almost anything in the wild, either a predator or prey species, typically it runs away from you. It tries to hide. It tries to get away. Usually, I mean, we have a hard time on our cases debunking stuff as, oh, that was an animal in the area. We have to spot it on a thermal cam, especially at nighttime when this was obviously taken at night, right? So especially at nighttime, without a thermal camera, we don't ever see it, even if it's like 10, 15 feet away from us, because it's trying not to be seen. So that's actually really logical of this guy who for years said, oh man, I captured this photo. So I don't think it's a hoaxed photo, but maybe the photographer was being hoaxed. I mean, that's a really clever bit of logic, especially if he was like driving up, right? Because most animals run away from cars, that sort of thing. So since 2006, Plaster hasn't really talked about the photograph or the incident anymore when interviewed. And I guess he gets bothered about it all the time since he's got the famous photo, the only photograph. He's almost in that same level of evidence area as Patterson would have been. Only this guy's like still alive. He didn't want to talk about it anymore, and he doesn't actually think that this photograph here is actually evidence anymore. And I totally feel for the guy. I have tons of photographs in videos and things that I have personally caught on supernatural type paranormal investigations where when I first look at it, I think, oh wow, this is a really great piece of evidence. And then a couple of years later, after I kind of run into the same thing over and over again on different investigations, on one of those subsequent investigations, I might have like a revelation, or something will come to light that I realize, oh, this isn't necessarily paranormal. And then I always try to make it a point to go back and make commentary on that earlier evidence that I captured or presented to show, hey, I think I know what this could have been at the time, right? So I'm totally in that same camp with Plaster there, and that guy's not even like a critical investigator. So I actually really respect anybody that can say like, oh yeah, I did this thing, but I'm having second thoughts about it, and like critically analyzes what they did. So in 2005, there was another kind of like anniversary story done on the Lake Worth monster, right? And it was kind of spawned because the Fort Worth Star-Telegram received a handwritten letter, right? It had no name, no forwarding address on it. Here's the excerpt from it. One weekend, myself and two friends from Northside High School decided to go out to Lake Worth and scare people on the roads, where there were always stories of monsters and creatures who would attack Parkers, the letter began. The writer claimed to have used tinfoil to make a homemade mask to scare a truckload of girls. When the friends were finished, they went to a Dairy Queen on North Side. I had a Coke float. The Goat Man had a parfait, the letter said. The Goat Man turns 55 this summer and resides a peaceful life in the hills outside of Joshua. So, if this letter is to be believed, we know at least one group of people actually hoaxed the people of Lake Worth, right? But the story goes on. It said, except whoever wrote the letter, a man who lives somewhere near Beaumont, based on the postal cancellation, isn't the only person to make such a claim. Mars, the reporter, told the newspapers in 1989 that police questioned several Castleberry students who were found with a faceless gorilla outfit and a mask. So that's one thing about the story that wasn't mentioned earlier, is that in 1989, like after a few more sightings happened, they actually found some people from Castleberry High School that actually had a gorilla outfit, and they questioned them. Of course, nobody was brought up on any like charges or anything like that, so nothing was proven. But I mean, that's pretty stark. Fort Worth, Texas Magazine outed a man this month identified as Vinzens, who admitted being involved in the infamous tire throwing incident of July 11th. He said that the tire went airborne only because it hit a bump after they rolled it, but he had no interest in naming anybody else. So people have come forward to say that they were part of this hoax out there, but they're basically not naming names, and there's no real evidence either way. And they never really found evidence at the time or later of the hoaxing. So these people could just be trying to piggyback it, wanting attention. But there are die-hard like Sasquatch fans out there that swear up and down this is a real thing, and then there's other people that pretty much go with the theory that it was students pranking everybody. And I mean, it's a good thing that none of them showed up with a gunshot wound, for that really horrible Scooby Doo episode. But I mean, that's just a really cool local piece of history that just kind of hits home when we're talking about like Bigfoot and Goatman and things like that. And like I said, it's only 10 minutes away. This is a place that anybody can go visit and go hunt Sasquatch on their own during the day. It's the Fort Worth Nature Preserve. If you go down 1886, get off on Confederate Park Road, the Nature Preserve, you just take a right there. You go in. I think it's like $7 to hike for the whole day. It's not a state park. It's owned by the city. But one of the trails is the Greer Island Trail, and you basically drive up to it. You walk across that land bridge, and there's all these trails you can take all over that island. And it's actually a little bit dangerous because there's alligators out there, right? And there's a pavilion. And people since '69 have still spotted this thing. Now, granted, the sightings are way, way lower. There are still reports that happen now and again. So that's definitely going to be something where I don't think we're going to find anything. I mean, we are not trackers. We're not zoologists. We're definitely not cryptozoologists. But, you know, we have a lot of the same equipment, so we're going to go out there at least a couple of times and, you know, walk around, maybe talk about the stories while we're out there. And it'd be really cool if we got something on film. I guess I'm more on the side that I think it was, you know, school kids making a hoax. But to go, so, and that's what initially spurred this podcast, because, you know, that's a local thing. Like that's something I kind of grew up with. And I thought it was cool. But then you go back to the global Bigfoot phenomenon. That's, of course, this is in Texas. Most of them are up in Washington, Sierra Nevada, um, Northern California, things like that, right? So, what are people seeing out there? And the thing is the way this one in Texas kind of played out, there were tons of eyewitness reports, and you know, while personal experience isn't evidence or proof, it's still valid. And there are a lot of personal experiences people had, and a lot of it gets just kind of put off as misidentification. So, not that your experience wasn't valid, it's just you didn't understand what you were seeing. And we actually take the same approach to a lot of our supernatural paranormal investigations. And we would do the same with if we ever got an investigation where people wanted to have us actually go in and investigate like an alien abduction or alien contact or something like that, right? I think people do actually see these things, but because of the moment, because of the circumstances, because of faults in our memory, the most likely explanation is not that you didn't have that experience or that people are trying to inherently trick you. Like, I want to think better of humanity. I want to think that not 90% of the population is out there trying to deceive you. It's that sometimes we all experience things and we don't quite understand what it is that we're seeing. You know, our senses don't process things the correct way. And so that's really my thought process on it. Now, do I think there's a possibility that there's an undiscovered species of something out there? Absolutely. Do I think there's a Bigfoot? Probably not. But we discover new species of things every day. Like 80% of our oceans are completely uh, uncharted. Like that is completely uncharted territory. The Amazon rainforest, the only parts of that are actually considered explored are the parts that we're cutting down. We find fish, we find spiders, insects. Actually, on the same level as Bigfoot, it was 5 years ago. This was cryptozoology, and science was hard set that this wasn't a thing. But all across North America, people were spotting these giant black cats, like a big black panther or a black jaguar. And they're saying there are no indigenous black cats to the North American region, right? But people were spotting them all over the place. And this thing was just as elusive as Bigfoot, if not more elusive, because like when they found tracks and stuff, it just looked like another big cat, like a bobcat or a mountain, I think a bobcat and a mountain lion. No, mountain lion is bigger. It's the same thing. We have mountain lions down here too. We have a numerous species of big cat, but we didn't have any black cats. And scientists were saying, no, this isn't possible, you're an idiot, blah, blah, blah. Sure enough, about 5 years ago, a handful of these things were actually discovered, and it turns out it's actually here, it's a thing, it's a jaguar, but it's not orange with black spots. It's just evolved in a way that it just has a black coat. The further north you get, we do have jaguars. They just have a black coat. And so, like, all of a sudden, now that it's a thing, like, it's widely accepted that if you see these big black cats, it's a thing. So, who's to say that there isn't a large, primate type gorilla ape or something like that in these really densely populated areas that are largely, like, unexplored officially, right? there could be stuff up there. Now, like the sightings all across the rest of the U.S., you get where it's in those more sparse areas. It's my logic, my thinking as a non-expert, that a lot of those are misidentification. And then, of course, you get into that where up in Spokane, Washington, where a lot of that sighting happens up there. A lot of that's also going to be misidentification. But, 1 out of 10 could still be some kind of large primate. Maybe they're exaggerating in their head. Maybe it's not 8 feet tall. Maybe it's actually 7 feet, 6 feet, same size as you, but from a distance it looks a lot bigger than it is. Or if it's like really loud when it makes its sound, you get scared and you remember things wrong. So, do I think there's a possibility for an actual Bigfoot out there, like a physical Bigfoot being that's a primate? Yeah. I don't think it's likely because there's not a lot of evidence. There's no fossil record. There's no bodies have turned up. There's not any real good photographs or video or anything like that. And of course, Americans, we love to hunt, and so nobody's brought back a carcass that's been proven to be real of that. But do I think it's a possibility? Yeah, I never rule anything out. I mean, I hunt ghosts on the weekends, so I'd be a total hypocrite if I didn't say that there was an animal out there that wasn't unidentified. But I think I agree with the research that I did, that largely the majority of it is like misidentification of bears or some other large animal that's out there. And even looking at the one photograph from 2007 that's debatable as one of the best pieces of evidence, it could be a bear with mange, or it could be just like a chimpanzee. Like, there's no super good size comparison there. Like they said, it was a youth Bigfoot. So it doesn't quite hit that marker. So, evidence withstanding, I'm open-minded to the possibility, but I don't know. I'm really leaning towards misidentification, and then the other percentage of it being hoax. So that was my total non-expert report as a paranormal investigator on Bigfoot. Normally I hunt spirits, ghosts, things like that. At some point I'm going to have to do one of these on aliens, I guess. I watch Ancient Aliens. I think I've read Chariot of the Gods. I think a lot of that is really super cool. So, I could maybe do if you guys liked this, I could maybe do the same thing with aliens. Like I said, you can call me on my BS, but I gave you the warning. I'm not an expert, but I didn't see anybody else doing a live stream on it. And now you guys know a little bit more about, it's not my hometown, but the town next door to my hometown. And they're super cool Bigfoot sighting. And if you're in the area, you can come check it out for yourself and look for evidence. I told you how to get there. It's like $7. You can stay all day till dark. And yeah, there's that. Of course, we've got the book about like what we normally investigate. Of course, we want you to check that out. Check out our website at NTParanormal.com, where you can check out all our other videos, my other podcasts. Like we've done 100 investigations, and we have most of them up there. Or you can just go back and, if you missed part of this podcast, go back to the beginning and listen to the whole thing, and listen to me ramble and stir everything up and gripe about how Scooby Doo just didn't have any realistic graphic scenarios. So I don't see any more questions up here on the board, so I'm just going to call it quits for now. So everybody have a good day, have a safe weekend, don't drink too much, don't get in a car wreck, and try not to hit any Bigfoots on the road, because it's going to leave an 18-inch scar down the side of your car, and you're going to have a hard time explaining it. All right, everybody have a good weekend.